All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Tamia Fowlkes, and I'm your moderator for today's panel, in which we are talking about spreading voter awareness through digital documentation. And this is so crucial for us in this moment as we're dealing with a national pandemic, and we're not sure when we're going to get back on campus, especially for students, and generally just tabling and getting out and helping people to learn how to vote, get information about voting in our community. So we have the pleasure today of having Johnnie Jae and Isabel Muir here to talk about voting and digital mobilization. And in wake of so many tremendous political and social issues, it's so crucial for us to continue informing our community about voting and how we can continue to expand that conversation. So I'll start with Isabel, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, and we'll start our conversation.
Absolutely. My name is Isabel. I am an organizer with the student PIRGs, specifically with their New Voters Project, and a recent graduate from Eckerd College.
And Johnnie, then if you wanted to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Johnnie Jae, and I'm the founder of A Tribe Called Geek, and also one of the co-founding board members for Not Your Mascots and Live Indigenous OK. And a lot of my work is centered around Native representation within the media, and also a lot of just raising awareness about the issues that we face in our communities.
And I wanted to ask both of you, we can start with Isabel again. How did you get involved with this work, and what excites you about this voter mobilization and conversation about informing people about issues that really impact us on our day-to-day lives?
Absolutely. Well, I started my involvement with the student PIRGs in 2018 when we started our first chapter on the campus, and we began with our New Voters Project. And it was really, a group of political science students who said, why aren't people on our campus voting enough? We have such a passionate student pop. And so we really wanted to see students understand that your vote really matters and that you can make a substantial impact when you are an educated and informed voter. And it's been incredibly rewarding seeing civic engagement really improve at my campus and really throughout the country because of our work. It's, there's nothing more pivotal than voting, especially today.
Absolutely. And Johnnie, can you speak a little bit about how you got involved and especially how important voting can be in relation to issues that tie to diversity and Native awareness and just being, aware of the communities that we inhabit in the world?
Being Native, I think we've been born into the resistance because we are resistance against colonization. So, our entire existence, everything about our daily lives, whether people realize it or not, is tied to politics. And so I think it's really important to be really informed and engaged and know how to exercise your rights and your power, because especially as Native people, we've been so disenfranchised that it's easy to feel powerless, especially because we are less than 2% of the entire US population. And, it's hard to really get Natives to vote. For the most part, we all believe, well, I wouldn't say all believe, but for the most part, we kind of see that both the Republican and Democratic parties as wings on the same bird. And so, there's a lot of Natives who don't want to engage with the system, mainly as an active resistance. There are a lot of Natives who, are Republicans, mainly because that's the way our ancestors kind of grew up, our older generations. I grew up in a Republican household. And, to see the whole mobilization against Democrats versus Republicans now compared to, what I saw growing up is very different to where, both parties kind of vilify each other. So I think there's a lot of work that we need to do to kind of bring back some civility in a sense to where we can talk about the issues and how they actually impact the people rather than talking about this party, that party, who's doing what, and pointing the blame game and using diverse communities as kind of pawns in that game of trying to vilify one or the other. Because, the whole reason that we do have a bipartisanship is so that we can have checks and balances, so that we have representation of conservative and liberal ideas, and their whole purpose is supposed to be working for us to represent our needs, but they don't seem to be doing that because for me, they just seem to be too involved in trying to hold on to power for each one, rather than looking at our needs as the people. So, I think it's really important, especially as a Native woman, to engage our younger youth and to let them know that there is power in our vote. Because yes, I don't want to shame anyone for not voting. because I know that the reasons that they have are valid, but at the same time, for every vote that we relinquish, we're giving away a bit of our power, because all of the policy, all of the laws that are passed that impact our communities are coming from people that don't know who we are as Native people. We're less than 2%. And very few people have an idea of how federal law works, how federal Indian law works. And also they don't know about the government to government relationships that our sovereign Native nations have with local, state, and federal governments. So I do think it's really important that we start engaging, not just Native youth, but all youth, to really start understanding that our votes have power and that it's how we start trying to make change. Even if it is working to dismantle the whole system in general, however you believe, that vote is powerful and we need to engage.
Absolutely. And I think it's so important that you bring up that conversation about civility and also just legitimizing the vote. Again, I think as young people and just as people in general, when we get caught up in politics, we tend to delegitimize the one thing that we have to make actual change, the one thing that we can actually use in our votes, in our conversations about voting and politics to really initiate some difference, some change in our community. So I think, Isabel, especially, you work on a campus where all of the work that you do has to be nonpartisan. You're talking to students from both sides of the aisle, no matter what, or people who rest in the middle. And so what is the importance for you in talking about issues in a way that's manageable and meaningful for students, that doesn't divide them, but informs them instead?
Yeah, a lot of what I've heard through organizing is specifically like, oh, my vote doesn't matter, like the system is broken, why would I vote? And, that's an incredibly important thing to hear no matter your partisanship. And I think that's the value of being nonpartisan as a whole, is because we're able to have that conversation that, like, okay, I understand you feel that there's not a place for you in these big parties, but, local elections matter, your mayoral election, your city council election. And that's been the great thing about, not being in one lane or the other, is that we're able to have conversations on a larger scale about voting, but also we're able to be all inclusive. I went to a liberal arts college, and so there was a specific leaning, but through our work, we've been able to involve multiple groups from all sides of the aisle and create a great amount of cohesion, where the focus is not who you vote for, but just the fact that you're doing so and remaining educated in your vote, because regardless, when we're all voting, we are exercising our right to do so and creating a stronger and better democracy.
Absolutely. And I wanted to ask both of you, and we can start with Johnnie, what has been some of the most meaningful ways that you've been able to connect with people about issues? It doesn't necessarily have to be voting, but I think all of those issues are inherently related to it. But what have been some of your favorite types of events or digital things that you've planned that have been really effective in getting people to start a conversation that they might not have had before?
I think social media has been really key for Native communities in raising awareness about the issues that we face within our communities, and also things that are going on within our communities, because we are less than 2% of the entire population. And when you think about that, you think 2%, well, how big is that? Well, our entire population could fit in the Detroit metropolis, that one city in the entire US. So that's how small our community is. And with social media, we've been able to mobilize our communities, because some of us are still very rural. There's also a huge digital divide between us. So social media has been able to bring us together and to help us mobilize not only online, but also within our communities and kind of joint efforts. So we have social media, we also have in real life efforts that, have been able to kind of bridge that digital divide for us. And some of the more important conversations I think that we've had in probably the last 10 years are in regards to the pipelines. Using social media was essential for No Dapple, and being able to kind of combat the narrative that was being played out in the media and let people know what was really going on within the camps. Natives being able to control that narrative themselves through social media, and also gaining allies, not just here in the US, but Canada and just worldwide, was amazing. You had hundreds of thousands of people that actually showed up at Standing Rock, in various ways to support Native communities, which is monumental. We've also had Not Your Mascot and Change the Name, which, as you can see in the last couple of weeks, the Washington football team did change their name, and they said never. We could print that in all caps if we wanted, and here we are now. And, so social media has been so essential for us in able to just mobilize and also to spread awareness and educate, because there's so much miseducation about Native people, in just all of our society, not just in politics, but, in the entertainment industry. And for Native people to be able to have their own voice and to be able to speak for ourselves has been so, I don't know, I want to say hopeful in the last couple of years, because it's not just this older generations, it's our younger generations. We have youth who are like 8 to 10 that are leaders in the climate justice movement now. And, we have teenagers who are creating such wonderful projects in order to raise awareness for like the murdered and missing Indigenous women, and also to mobilize young voters in this election. So we have a lot of work, and it's all been thanks to, social media being able to bring us together and help to not only bridge us together with our communities, but also with other communities. Because there's a lot of work that's going on now between, the Black community and Native community, because so much of our history is entangled. And that has been really interesting to see unfold, especially in light of, the current political climate that we're in now. So it's been pretty amazing, but I think my favorite conversations have just been the ones that we've been able to mobilize online, because you don't just see that online. It's not just people being keyboard warriors, as people like to say, but you see that work translating into the real world as well, into I guess you would say, the real world, not just inside this matrix world that everyone thinks we live in, or a simulation. Like, we actually see the physical benefits of the work that's being done online. So I think, just all the conversations that we have online, whether it's, change the name, whether it's talking about the pipelines, and whether it's talking about, now we have some of our communities are facing de-establishment, which means that the current administration is working to strip them of their federal recognition in order to grab land. So I think those are some of the more important conversations that we're having right now, and are some of my favorite, because we're getting to educate a whole new generation about federal Indian law and what it means to be a sovereign nation within a nation. So I think those are some of my favorite conversations right now.
Absolutely. And just to go off of that quickly before we move on to Isabel, I'm wondering, how do you think that people can really learn how to connect with these other communities that they might not be a part of, and maybe learn how to vote for other people as well? I think we're always in a mindset of voting for ourselves and not necessarily considering or fully addressing the broader scope of issues which impact other communities that might be lesser represented. And so what would be the ways that you would recommend people going about, getting more informed and finding those resources to really be helpful and, represent other communities as well in their vote? And that was for Johnnie, if you wanted to just branch off of what you were already saying. Yeah, sorry.
I think the best way is just to open communication, to reach out to different organizations. And I'm sure Isabel's organization has gotten really good at this as well, and able to mobilize everybody, because we all, like you said, we often think about voting for ourselves. We don't think about the impact that it has on other communities, because we just look at, oh, well, this candidate may be for this idea and that benefits our community. But at the same time, that same candidate could have a policy that doesn't work so well for another community. And I think that's really important for us to keep in mind, and for us to start communicating with each other, because a large part of the problem that we have here in the US is that we don't interact enough with each other, with different communities. So, now we're seeing like Black Lives Matter, we're seeing all these conversations come to light, and people are like, why are they just now talking about this? And it's not that we're just now talking about this or that these problems are new. It's just that we're just now being able to have these conversations outside of our communities. And I think it's going to take a little time in order for us to really mobilize together, because we also have a language barrier. We all don't communicate in the same way. So, there's a lot of things that kind of get misconstrued, whether it's through tone or whether it's through, like natives, we tend to be sarcastic. So that kind of doesn't help. But, I think it just takes some time, and I'm glad we're starting to have more conversations with each other, with different communities, and seeing what their issues are and how they intersect with the communities that, the issues that are affecting our communities. Because as long as we keep communicating, I think we'll start getting better at reading each other and learning like how to communicate better with each other, how to work better without overstepping and talking over, or trying to kind of play that savior role that we tend to fall into quite a bit in any kind of advocacy work. So I think it's just keeping open lines of communication and being able to be honest, and also being able to be uncomfortable, because none of these conversations that we have, they're not comfortable. They're all going to make us reflect on our own worldviews, as well as challenging, not just our worldviews, but also other people's worldviews in terms of how they view us and the issues that we face. So it's going to be kind of like an uphill battle, but we're seeing these conversations happen more and more and get more honest, more open. And I really love that, because yes, it's going to hurt. It's going to be tumultuous. There's going to be pushback. There's going to be a lot of debate, but that's what we need in order to really understand each other and in order to start compromising and find a middle ground to move forward from.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to move on. I wanted to pivot a little bit to some larger scale digital events. I wanted to ask Isabel, in your experience, what has been some of the most meaningful events that you've had, some of the most effective, and how do you keep people engaged in a time where we're all on our phones, on our computers all day, all the time?
Well, when we moved digital, being college students, it was an incredibly uncertain time. We didn't know if we were going back to campus, and everyone really had to go home. And some of our biggest concern was that we were going to lose the momentum that we were creating, engaging students and, ushering them into civic engagement. But what I've seen is just incredibly inspiring. Not only are we reaching out to students, but students are reaching out to us. How do I register? How do I vote by mail? Things like that. Taking a very active interest. And I think you can credit that to not just sitting at home all day, but also like the Black Lives Matter movement really igniting a fire within Gen Z that has been incredible. And we've had some great events, just Q&As. I would say the thing that I think is really the most impactful is the coalition building that we've done. So at Eckerd in particular, we've gotten our Afro-American Society to really take an active voice, but we're also working with our Young Democrats and things like that, organizations that represent our community as a whole. And, Johnnie brings up the idea of voting for other people. I think that has really become a mindset because of events like that. We've seen people, looking outside of their own scope, but also using introspection and saying, oh, like I should vote with my major, take an active role and interest and see how every single vote really affects who we are as individuals. And, some of the reasons these events have been so successful is the power of social media and working with other groups to create large scale events that can encapsulate the entire community, as opposed to just, the people who are already voting. We're hitting the people who haven't taken an active interest before, but had some time to sit and reflect and say, this is something I should really be involved in. And so I would say definitely Q&As and also just peer-to-peer contact have really been what's successful in not just getting people to vote, but really think about why they're voting and what they want to vote for.
For sure. And I'm just wondering, what are some of your favorite ways that you've been able to engage with that peer-to-peer organizing in a way that's different than you would on campus? I know for us, I'm an Goodman Ambassador as well. And we usually do a lot of in-person tabling events. We have events where we have students, coming up, talking to us about voting, about issues that they care about. We do movie screenings, and that whole landscape has just entirely changed. But a big important part of this conversation always is doing it with your friends, or doing it with your peers or your colleagues or your family. So for you, what has been that transition, and how have you been able to keep up the excitement on that realm?
It was definitely the same for us. we had cookouts and different things like that and tabling that were incredibly useful. But we've still done like movie screenings, Netflix parties, stuff like that, and just things to kind of generate fun around voting and make sure that it doesn't feel like a chore. But taking a family aspect has definitely been really great. We pivoted a little bit and organized over the census and things like that, and kind of showed that holistic approach to democracy where people could fill out the census with their families, and doing different social media challenges and having people reach out to their friends and reach out to their friends, and really spreading the word that way, mouth to mouth, instead of simply posting a social media graphic, which has been incredibly successful and also made voting and democratic work feel personal, which is going to be a lot more impactful, maybe even than just passing a table by and getting a flyer. And so in many ways, we've seen that digital organizing be more impactful in some ways because people are having real conversations and friends are talking with one another, as opposed to just, being talked to by someone you don't know.
For sure. And a question I'd like to ask of both of you is, how do you think we can avoid digital burnout before we get to November? While people are obviously excited about doing this work right now, and it's been about 3 months since we've all been stuck at home and kind of doing this digital stuff, how do you think we'll continue that momentum into the next few months and really keep people engaged and creative in new ways? We can start with Johnnie or Isabel. Yeah.
I can talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, what I said earlier about making voting fun, I think that that's still really important, but I also think it's really important to share victories. Obviously there's 100 days today until election day, and that feels really far away, but it's also really close. But it's important to take a step back and say, look at all we've done, and look at all we're going to do. And remember that it's a day-by-day process, and there are different ways to get involved where you don't feel completely overwhelmed. I think it's about taking small actions in your day-to-day. Check with 5 friends during the week, make sure that they've registered, help them register. And something that's been really useful to us is we have a vote tool, studentvote.org, that you can do everything on there. You can register to vote, but you can also select to vote by mail and find out more about what's going to be on your ballot. And it's been a great resource that, instead of feeling completely overwhelming, not knowing how you're going to vote in November, you're able to not only register, but make a plan to vote safely, which is going to be so important with the ongoing coronavirus. And so I think taking little actions and remembering that voting is important, but it is also a fun, enjoyable experience to take part in making the change you want to see.
I agree with Isabel. I think it is taking note of those small victories, which has been very difficult for Native communities in light of Corona and over the last couple months, because it has devastated our communities. And, speaking for myself as somebody who has lost someone to COVID and who has, experienced several family losses in the last couple months, it does get overwhelming when you think about all these issues that are impacting your community. And it's easy to get burned out because you feel like you constantly have to be raising awareness. Like you have to let people know how they can help, or let other people know in your community what you are doing in order to, maybe divert resources to different communities that are in need right now, or to raise awareness about which communities need help, what groups are fundraising, and how you can help different communities. Like you definitely get burned out. And I think it's being able to take note of those small victories, even with the Washington football team, because I work with an organization called Not Your Mascots that has been our focal point. But at the same time, when you look at the larger scale of issues that we face in our communities, it really is the lowest hanging fruit. And so we've been celebrating the name change, and it's because we needed that win. We've had so much loss in the last couple months. We really needed to be reminded that, our work matters. And, and a lot of times when we're doing organizing, you oftentimes come into that mode where it's like, does this even matter? Is this working? And, it's easy to get in that mindset when you're just overwhelmed, and taking note of those small victories, especially lately, has been so monumental, because it's like, look, this worked. What we were doing wasn't in vain. It had an impact, and it's going to continue to impact. And we've seen this whole flood. It's not just the Washington football team because now you're starting to see high schools and businesses starting to reassess how they use Native imagery and Native names in their work. And so you see that large kind of like domino effect. And it's been really hopeful, because it lights that fire back. And it's like, oh, okay, what we're doing isn't in vain. So what we're doing here, that's not in vain either. But a lot of what we're doing too is just taking note of those small victories. We have some wonderful organizations, Native Vote Counts. We also have the Illuminatives, and we also have the National Congress of American Indians, who have really been mobilizing efforts to engage Native voters. And they've done such an incredible amount of work. And a lot of it too is trying to make it fun and trying to make it more lighthearted, because it gets heavy when you think about just the toll or the impact that it's going to have if you don't vote, or, what's going to happen if, just all these things that you never think of. We never thought Corona would happen, and here it is. So, we never know what's going to happen next. And so, your vote counts, the work that you do, it matters. And, just in order to overcome that burnout, because it's so easy, especially now, because we're all just on social media 24/7. And because that's the only way we can really communicate with different communities and with friends now. So, I think it's just making time for celebrating the little wins and making sure that you acknowledge those small wins. Because a lot of times you're thinking, well, that's just this. So, it doesn't really matter, but it does, because the impact that has, continues over into other issues as well. So I think it's just taking note of those small issues and trying to be as hopeful as you can, and just realizing that, whether or not you realize that you have power always, and you were born into that power, and you will continue to have that power as long as you exercise it.
I'd also just add,
yeah, go ahead.
that we have to remember it's okay to take a personal day.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to right now, because I understand, you're scrolling through the timeline, and it's like, oh, there's so much to do all the time, and it feels incredibly overwhelming and crushing a little bit. But if you don't take a step back, breathe, remember what you're doing is important, and that you might not see the change you're making now. We'll see it in November. We will. Young people are going to vote because we're mobilizing them. And you have to remove yourself, and then you get to go back at it and hit it twice as hard, because you're re-energized and recharged, and you can't blame yourself for needing to take a personal day. You got to remember that.
Yes, that is so, so true. And I think on the note of talking about fatigue, I think that's so important to recognize how we can also maximize our resources. And I think for college students on a campus, one of our best resources is professors, and doing things like Q&As and talkbacks where they can, share their expertise on an issue. So are there any creative ways that you've been able to maximize your resources to connect with the people that you have, connections with, to inform others and, take some of that toll off of yourself, but still be doing that work of educating and informing others? And that could be through, podcasts or YouTube videos or anything of the sort on social media. I'm just curious if you can share any experience that you think might be helpful for our audience today.
Absolutely. We've done a number of different things. I'm recording a podcast soon with some fellow students about the importance of voting that's going to play on our radio station. But something that we've really been utilizing is student government. They have obviously a very loud voice on any campus, and really partnering with them, as well as, our campus activities department, working with them. And they have been a great partner in making sure that we get the word out and just publicizing things as much as possible. I'd say another really great resource for schools is Greek Life. Reach out to them. charity is a part of their work. And so this could be something that they could really organize around with you. And again, they have an incredibly meaningful voice on a lot of campuses. And then just talking with your administration. A simple email from a college's president is going to make a difference. And if you include a link to some sort of vote tool where they can register to vote, you're going to get clicks on that and it will work. And that's a small act, but those small things, not only are they not overwhelming, but they're still going to make a difference. And even things as far as social media, DMing other clubs. And not only is that going to, allow the word of civic engagement to spread, but it's also going to create that sense of community that I think a lot of college students are really craving right now.
I agree. I think one of the most wonderful ways that I've seen our youth really engaging is through TikTok. Native TikTok is so beautiful right now. It's been so hopeful, so lighthearted, and especially in talking about serious issues, the way that they've been able to use TikTok and even Snapchat to talk about like the murdered and missing Indigenous women, to talk about the need to vote, to talk about, even now COVID safety in Native communities has been amazing. And I'm grateful because that the younger generations are starting to pick that up, because that takes a lot off of us. We get to help guide them, help to, give them the information that they need, and they get to create from it. And I know everybody's like, what do you mean younger generations? But, I'm actually going to be 40 this year. And so, I'm already in this mindset, like our younger generations need to start picking up that torch, and I'm so glad to see that, because I always tell our youth, like, come take my job. Like, I'm tired, and like, come do this. And, our Native youth have really stepped up, and, it's the way it is in our Native communities. What one generation starts, the next generation picks it up. And, we kind of do the work in the mindset of, we know we may not see the impact of our work in our lifetimes, but it's not for us. It's for those future generations. They're the ones who are going to get to benefit from our work. Like, that's why the Washington football team changing their name was so monumental, because a lot of us were like, we're not going to see this in our lifetime, but here we are, we get to see it. So it's a victory. But, I love the way that our youth are being way more creative, way more tuned into the way that, young people communicate and work with each other, the methods that they use. Because it's not just TikTok, it's not just Snapchat, they're using Twitch and video games to raise awareness about serious issues. And it's really interesting to me, because I was like, wow, and here we were just like, we're going to do a Twitter storm, we're going to do this, we're going to do these videos. And here they are finding new ways, like, to take what we started in our work and take it to the next level. And so it's amazing to see how they're, playing Apex Legends, but yet they're talking about Native votes. And so I really love that, because it kind of shows that, we're all being pretty engaged in this. Like, we all know what's at stake. And we're starting to see people realize, like, oh, we got to use that power. We've got to, raise awareness. And there's ways we can do this without being preachy, and without kind of, just kind of being on that preacher's box and just giving you the straight facts. Like, we can make it fun, make it lighthearted. So I think those are the ways that, I really see our Native youth like have been engaging and just taking what some of us older generations have started and just running with it. And I absolutely love it, because it's so hopeful. Like, I already know, like, it doesn't matter what happens. Like, I already know victory is ours in the long run, because of what our youth are doing today. Like, they're doing so much more than we ever did. And, they're so much more engaged, so much more open to learning about how to be better and how to understand other people better, and just more mindful of other people. So, people can have like this doom and gloom outlook, and they often ask me like how I keep an upbeat attitude. And I'm like, it's because of our youth. I see everything that they're doing, and I already know no matter what, our future generations are going to rock it, because they're already doing it now.
For sure. And I think that is so, so important for people to hear right now. And one of the things I wanted to touch on, and maybe one of our wrap-up questions for this session, is, not everybody can be an organizer or out in the street mobilizing people all the time. And obviously some people's levels of fatigue or energy that they can put towards these movements is limited depending on your personal situation. So what would be your recommendation for our audience today in using their personal brand, their personal experience, and the things that they really care about to convey this message of voting is important, and why we should all be a part of this conversation for change in the next few months, years, and for the rest of our lives, honestly. And if Johnnie, if you want to start, that would be great.
I think it's just being able to realize that sometimes we look at our disadvantages as disadvantages, but at the same time, they could be opportunities. I'm a Native woman, but I'm also disabled. I do have lupus. And so throughout COVID, I've been in really severe quarantine. I can actually count the times I've left the apartment since January. Social media has been the only way that I've been able to continue organizing and to continue engaging other people in the work that we're doing in Native communities. And sometimes that could be so disheartening because I'm so used to traveling to different conferences, to going to different classrooms and working with the people on that face-to-face basis, because when they can see you and they can, realize like, oh, you're an actual human being, like you're here, like you're not just this person on the internet that is a personality, like you're an actual person. You connect so much more, and it makes them so much more mindful of the way that their actions, their behavior impact you as a person. And so it's been really interesting to see how we can translate that to online, because now that's how we're having to engage each other. And I think it's just being open to following different voices. Stepping out of your comfort zone, because a lot of people, don't know Native people. So I think it's, following Native organizations like the National Congress of American Indians, following Native media like Indian Country Today or Native Max Magazine. That way you can start understanding the different perspectives from these different communities. And with Indian Country, there's so many avenues, so many Natives who are doing such incredible work on so many different fronts. So I think it's just, seeking those voices out, taking the initiative to, want to learn about what's going on in other communities rather than just waiting for the media or waiting for, another organization to tell you what you should care about. Like, seek it out. There's always opportunities, and there's so many people that are there willing to, answer questions. If you're not going to learn if you don't ask those questions. So, I always tell people, like, it's better to ask. Even if you think it sounds dumb, just ask, because, you're not going to learn the answer or find out what somebody else thinks about that unless you are able to ask, and unless you're able to hear where they're coming from. That's the only way we're going to understand each other. So I think it's just, being able to reach out to each other and understand that we need to start seeing each other as people, like not so much looking at each other as brands, as internet personalities or celebrities, or just these mindless or, clout building accounts on social media, but as actual people, because we're the people behind these. Like, yes, our podcasts are online. Yes, YouTube is online. Yes, the work we're doing is online, but we're still very much real people with real feelings. And we still have the issues that we're talking about online have a real life impact. So I think it's important that we, just start trying to remember that we need to engage each other's humanity rather than just like each other's brands.
Yeah, absolutely. Those points are all exactly right. And something, I'd say for especially the younger generation is I've seen a lot of the, reposting infographics on your Instagram story. And while that's important, I think that young people really have to be ready to have conversations with their loved ones and with their friends about the importance of voting and taking an active role in our community. There are little changes that individuals can make every single day, whether it's calling your representatives. I urge every young person watching this, go to studentvote.org, not only register to vote, but request a vote by mail or absentee ballot so that you can vote safely in November. It's incredibly important. And take time to educate yourself. Having those conversations, educating yourself on the issues that are facing us today in all different ways is making a difference. It might not feel like it is right at that point, but having that education and knowledge is power. It is power to vote, to know what you're talking about, and to be aware of what's going on in the world. And that's something small that you can do every single day that is making a positive impact.
For sure. Well, thank you both so much. I think you offer such wonderful insight for our viewers today. It's going to be so wonderful to see how these next few months play out and how people can utilize these resources to really make a difference on their campus, in their community, with their family members. And once again, these conversations, as we've talked about this entire time, are so important in diversifying the people that we're speaking to about these issues and really trying to, mobilize everyone, because we only make our democracy better when everybody has a chance to participate in it. So we really just wanted to push that message to make sure that you have the resources that you need to go about these next few months and really be effective in engaging with your community. So if you all want to just say your name, and if you want to say your social media handles or where you're going to be found on the internet, so people, if they want to connect with you or hear more about the work that you do, they can definitely do that. So I can have Johnnie go first and then Isabel.
Okay. Well, again, my name is Johnnie Jae, and you can find me on Twitter at Johnnie Jae, JohnnieJae. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram. And you can follow A Tribe Called Geek, where we talk about indigeneity for the geeks at the powwow. So we talk about indigenous geek culture in STEM. And you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at A Tribe Called Geek, and also find us at www.atribecalledgeek.com.
And I'm Isabel Muir from the Student PIRGs. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Isabel Rita Rose, Isabel. And you can check us out at the Student PIRGs or Florida PIRG students if you're a Floridian. And of course, studentvote.org. Get yourself registered today.
Wonderful. And lastly, I'm Tamia Fowlkes. I'm an Goodman Ambassador and the Big Ten Voting Challenge intern from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. You can find us for Badgers Vote and all your Wisconsin voting information at Badgers Vote on Instagram and Twitter. And then my Instagram is Tamia18. My Twitter is Tamia_18. But most of all, we just want to get you voting information. So please check out any of those resources. Try to connect with different communities and have a wonderful day. We are so happy that you guys came and joined us today. So thank you so much.